your solos sound amateurish and feel empty, it's not because you lack innate talent. It's actually because you lack a repeatable process for writing great solos. Look, a lot of people don't teach this stuff. So in this video, I'm going to teach you a literal formula that you can follow every single time to write melodic, emotional guitar solos, using only the techniques that you already know. The first step is to identify the mother scale, or in other words, identify the key scale. I highly recommend looking up a backing track on YouTube, and usually it will tell you what key it's in first of all. So for this solo, I just typed in Dream Theater type backing track. Now, if you're someone who doesn't know scales that well or doesn't know how to play scales across the neck, I have a really good resource that will allow you to do this really quickly. Go to this website, Discover Guitar Online, and in this website, they have a ton of different scales. So this backing track is in the key of D minor, and it told me that. So what you would do is you would go to the website and you would find a minor pentatonic scale or just a minor diatonic scale or a minor blues scale, and you would just make sure that any one of these R's or these root notes on any one of these patterns lands on a D note. If you do that, you're good. Or in this case of this backing track, and like a lot of others, it actually tells you on the screen what scale to use. The next step in the process is you want to try to express a specific feeling or emotion. And usually the backing track or the chords will already automatically give you that feeling. But I can't stress how important it is to, at the beginning, going into starting to write a solo, how important it is to try to, instead of just sort of mindlessly regurgitating old licks that you've known for 20 years, to actually say, okay, I'm going for a melancholy feel, or I'm going for like a cinematic feel, or I'm going for like a depressed feeling. Whatever it is, intentionally set that tone at the beginning. The next step is to come up with a catchy melody. And someone who I think is one of the best ever to do this is John Petrucci. He's really known for his shred and stuff. And people who don't really know his work will say, oh, he just shreds all over the place. But he is one of the best ever at writing really beautiful melodies. And honestly, one of the easiest, best ways to come up with melodies is to actually hum them or sing them. Because if you just rely on what your fingers are automatically going to do, you're just going to go back to this stupid pentatonic box. Right? And you're not going to come up with a good melody. But if you throw on the backing track and just start humming and with this emotional intention that we just talked about in mind, and start humming and singing different things, then you're going to come up with something a lot better, and then you go ahead and figure that out on the actual guitar. So I actually started humming this melody. Those were melodies that I started humming along. I wouldn't have come up with something that melodic and that like epic if I just like went to what my fingers automatically did with 20 years of muscle memory. The next thing that you want to do is when you're working out the melody or working out any ideas in the solo, you want to pause the backing track and you want to actually work out ideas by pausing and then trying it and then pausing. Because a lot of times the biggest mistake that people make is that they just jam over the backing track over and over and over. And again, they're just like letting their body do the old tricks that they've known since they were 14 years old. And that's why your solos sound so boring and so predictable. So when you come up with an idea, for example, if you're humming a melody and you want to try to make it fit now, pause the solo and actually try to work it out very slowly on your own and say, okay, I think that rhythmically fits in. Let me try it over these 10 seconds of the track. I had to do that for this whole solo. I had to really work out this lick. I had to really work out this blues lick. I really had to work that out and rhythmically make it fit in the sequence. And I had to pause and I had to think about how it rhythmically would fit in and how it would fit in with the chords and everything like that. And that's not going to happen if you're just mindlessly jamming over the track over and over. That's not how you write a good solo. So pause the track and intentionally work things out. The next step is to outline the chords. Now this is really important to actually make things fit. Most people, they know that, pentatonic shape and they just play through that the whole entire solo. And that's why it sounds boring and predictable. But if you target the actual notes that are in the chords being played, along with the melody that you're implementing, it's going to sound way more melodic. This is a huge part of sounding melodic and emotional. So what I did is I started out just in the D minor pentatonic, and then I just came down here, and this is part of the melody that I hummed out. And I came up here. Now here's where I really started to outline chords. So now we're on a C chord. Before we were on the D minor chord, we were on a B flat and a D minor chord. So I stayed within the D minor notes because that's mostly what was happening. Now we're on a C chord. So I wanted to come up with a lick or a phrase that outlined the C major notes. So I was already up here on the neck, so I chose this C major shape and added this fourth interval into it, so it has this sort of C major but suspended sound. And I outlined some of the notes in this shape, and I did some interval skips, which I got from John Petrucci. And this is something I really had to pause and work out. And we were still on the C chord here, so I went ahead and I outlined another C major triad here, did a little slide down, and then skipped a string. That's all just C major, and instead of just playing the boring C major scale, I took the chord tones, so the 1, the major third, and the perfect fifth, and I tried to highlight those because that's really going to make it sound more melodic. If I just go through the boring scale, that's not going to sound as cool, but if you skip intervals and highlight the root, the third, and the fifth, in these major or minor chords, that's going to make it sound way more melodic. So another good thing about these backing tracks on YouTube is they'll tell you what chords are being played. And so you can really pause and figure out how can I really highlight the chord tones as I'm writing this solo. The next step in writing a good emotional melodic solo is to build the dynamic of the solo. So I got this from John Mayer. He gave a talk at Berklee School of Music, and he talked about really building the dynamic to a climax. And so that's why in this solo I start on the lower register notes, and then I come up here and I already start building the dynamic an octave higher. It's just this, octave higher, change the melody a little bit. If I build dynamics, I'm talking about just building the emotion, like even just simply starting on lower notes and then building to higher notes. That's a good way to build dynamics. Or go from like more simple melodies to more like attack and faster lines. That's a great way to also build the dynamic of the solo. So you want to think of the solo as like a story. You want to start by just a little bit slower, and then you want to build the dynamic with tension or with faster notes or with higher register notes, whatever you want to do. Building the dynamic is really important for creating an emotional solo. The next thing you can do is you can invoke emotion by creating tension. You can create tension through different like intervals and things like that, but a great way that I like to do it in melodic solos is to throw in a blues lick with that flat 5 note, because this flat 5 note is naturally a dissonant interval, and the blues scale in and of itself can really make something like, it can invoke emotion because it's different than that melodic phrasing. It goes to this like ripping blues line real fast. And that tension can really catch someone off guard a little bit and make it a little bit sweeter to listen to. Straight back into the melodic line. That last line that I play as well, right there, is the most tension because that chord that we're on, this is another example also of outlining chords. So the chord that's happening here is an A7, an A dominant 7. And that the major third in an A7 is, if you don't know theory, this might be a little confusing, but anyways, I used a harmonic minor, a D harmonic minor, because the harmonic minor note, the raised 7th in a harmonic minor, matches that major third in the A7 chord. And that is a really dissonant interval, and it matches it perfectly. So I use this scale to match this very tense, dissonant A7, A dominant 7 chord. right there. So this was another way that I really invoked emotion by not only matching the chord, but using this very dissonant interval here to build tension. The next thing is you want to really dial in your tone. And this could be a whole entire video. But for now, I'll just tell you what I'm using. I'm using the Pliny plugin by Neural DSP. And I have this hot rail pickup, which I really wanted that sound for the solo because it's a really hot pickup. And you can really get this like these soaring epic leads with a really hot pickup. And so dialing in your tone is also an important way to invoke emotion in your, emotional solo writing. The last thing is to steal ideas and licks from your favorite guitar players. And in this solo, I really had John Petrucci's Another Day, Dream Theater's Another Day, John Petrucci's solo in mind as I wrote it. And I also just love the way John Petrucci does these interval skips and adds in these fast lines. And so I was trying to emulate that. And I took a couple ideas from him and Marcos Foley. And look, if you don't understand how to effectively use licks that you know from other guitar players and basically transpose them into any key and use them in any key like this, I actually made a video where I teach you exactly how to do that. So if you want to see that video, go ahead and click right here.